What's up, guys? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you after the Eagles lock up the 1 seed in the NFC and the NFC East Division crown, finishing 14-3 with a 22-16 win over the New York Giants on Sunday. So just wanted to take a look at where the Eagles stand and some takeaways from that game as we have a week off and get prepared for the playoffs. If you haven't subscribed already, we'll be doing a ton of content for back-to-back years. The Eagles and the Cowboys will be in the playoffs. That is fantastic for us and for the show. Obviously, a lot easier to get content when both of our teams are playing well, winning, and making the playoffs. So we'll have a ton of content getting you ready for the Tampa Bay Bucks and Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football, and we are awaiting the opponent for the Eagles in the divisional round as the 1 seed. So let's get into it. This was a pretty boring game, so I just want to touch on a few things that you saw in the game and how that kind of impacts this team going forward into the playoffs. So first and foremost, preserving health. I thought, like I said, this was an ugly, boring game. Some of it from rust, and a lot of it I thought was just preserving health and making sure that there were no further injuries. You know, they're playing without Lane Johnson. They're playing without Vontae Maddox, Josh Sweat, all not playing, and CJ Gardner-Johnson first game back. Jalen Hurts, obviously the big one, his first game back. And it just felt like a game plan that was geared towards, all right, let's win. They probably wanted to get the starters out and actually bench them in the third, fourth quarter. That didn't happen. The Giants were playing hard. But I think the overarching theme there was just like, don't do anything to put people in jeopardy of getting hurt. Just be clean and win. That's it. Those are the two goals. I think the biggest part that you saw with that was no designed runs for Jalen Hurts, unless you include the one QB sneak that they had with him. He did have a few runs there, but that was more like the pocket broke down. Nobody was open in coverage. And I just felt like that game plan, it's going to be made of a lot of it where if you watch that game, you're going to say, oh, the Eagles aren't quite ready for playoff football. And I think part of that could be true, but it's more in the sense of, again, health. Like, are they not ready because they don't look good, or are they not ready because you haven't had Jalen Hurts for 2 weeks and then you brought him back for 1 week and it was more just like trying to get him through the game in a win, and you weren't trying to give too much. You weren't trying to put too much on his plate. The extra bye week is going to help a ton because Nick Sirianni had said like he still has pain in his shoulder. So now you have 2 weeks to get him ready. So I think part of that vanilla preseason game plan that you were seeing, why I'm not freaking out too much about it, was you weren't seeing them go all out 110%. It wasn't that creative. It was just geared towards, all right, let's not put too much on Jalen and let's just win this game. And I think another part of that too is if the Giants are a playoff team, they're the 6th seed. There's a pretty, I kind of like their chances against the Vikings. They're plus 2.5 right now. This game, when they played just a few weeks ago, came down to a 62-yard field goal made by the Vikings. And listen, they've got some like lucky charm rabbit's foot the way that the Vikings have been winning this year, but you just kind of feel like at some point that luck could run out. And the Eagles could be playing the Giants again 2 weeks from now if they win, and they're the 6th seed, seeing if the Seahawks win or lose out in San Francisco. So they're an opponent possibility for sure, I think. And I think they have a really good chance against the Vikings coming up here on Sunday. So you don't want to put it too much on tape for them either. So it was just like get in, get out, win, done. And I just thought the game plan, if you're kind of wondering why it was so bad, I think a large part of that was just like, all right, let's just get Jalen out there and let's just like get him like back into game rhythm. We're not going all out. Let's just keep it really conservative. Now, I do think that there were times where they just, I don't think undisciplined is the word, but they weren't crisp. If you remember, there's a play, and it's on the last field goal. It's a 7-minute drive. They get all the way down to the 5-yard line, and it looked like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown somebody ran the wrong route because they both took an out route on 3rd and goal, and they ended up in the same place. I'm assuming one was supposed to go out, one was supposed to go in on the slant, and it's one of those cross routes where you almost pick the defender off while you're running your routes, and you're crossing like this. One out, one in. You got the two options right there with your two best receivers. Pretty simple, right? And you see it at the goal line all the time. Somebody ran the wrong route, and it just got messed up, and it's just like one of those plays where that's the difference between 3 and 7. We can talk about a vanilla game plan all you want. That should be a touchdown on one of those plays. But again, this is a team that really hasn't practiced with Jalen Hurts. He just got throwing the ball, not just practicing, throwing last Thursday. Now you get 2 weeks of that. So I'm not as concerned as maybe some other people are with that. I watched this team, like I have a good understanding of what this team is. I watched it for 3 months before I got hurt and what they are and what they could be. So I just think the biggest takeaway from that is you weren't injured and you won and you're the 1 seed. Now it's preserving health. It's getting Lane Johnson back. It's hopefully having Josh Sweat, and we'll see about Avonte Maddox. Two, the other takeaway that I had, the pass game aggression. So they start this game 9 passes, 1 run. I don't know if this is something from the coaching staff where they are attacking early in games to get the defense on their heels and then kind of balancing that out, especially as you get into the second half, because it's the second straight week where they were very pass happy to start. And then come the second half, then they had a great balance, and you see Miles Sanders a lot more. And at one point, it was 27 pass, 20 rush. And you're like, all right, well, that's a formidable balance. That's kind of what we're looking for. And then that was late in the third quarter. But early on, there were no run plays on the opening drive. It worked this time. I mean, they got all the way down the field and scored. But it just, again, is it like you're kind of being aggressive early to get the defense on their heels and then adjusting as it goes? Or are you just being overly aggressive? Are there too many pass plays early? Are you just going all out when you don't need to? Or is it not a good game plan to begin with because you're not having that balance? And maybe teams even catch on to the fact that you're throwing every single time in the first quarter and early in your drives. They always say the first 15 to 20 plays of an NFL game are scripted. It's usually what you're doing on your opening drive. Well, if you keep putting on tape that you're just going to pass the ball on all your opening drives, I feel like these good teams that you're going to play in the playoffs are going to react to that. So I don't know if that's on purpose, that they're purposely like, we are throwing the ball nonstop to start this game, see if you can stop it, and then overcompensating and kind of balancing that out. Or is the coaching staff just too pass happy? If there's one like concern I have, it's like, does this strategy work? And is it a strategy? Or are you just calling too many pass plays? And I just would love to see just more of the mix of the running backs in there and getting Miles Sanders started. I feel like the 70-year-old boomer who's like, run the damn ball, smash mouth football. And it doesn't just have to be that, but it just feels like you have such a talented core of running backs where waiting until the second half to really incorporate Miles Sanders just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And what I liked about yesterday is they seemed to mix in Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell. And I would like it on record now. I feel like Kenny Gainwell is going to have like that Corey Clement run in the playoffs this year. If we do make a deep run, I want that on record. He could be that guy. But it's just like giving the defense a change of pace within the running game itself, because there's 3 different distinct running styles with Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell, and Miles Sanders. So if you're flowing those guys through, it's kind of similar to how pitchers don't just throw fastballs. That's what makes it so tough for hitters, is you're not just seeing 95-mile-an-hour fastball again and again and again. You're mixing in sliders, cutters, changeups, and that what changes your eye level and makes it difficult for them to hit the ball. It's kind of the same in the run game. Like, we have 3 guys with very different running styles. It changes your eye level. That's not a short joke for Boston Scott, but it is kind of true. It's hard to see him. Miles Sanders has the agility of the cuts, and I think that burst that Kenny Gainwell has is fantastic. So I just think there are so many options and so many weapons with this team that you might want to be better at balancing it out early, but we'll see. I think that's another thing to keep an eye on, because this is 3 out of the last 4 weeks of them doing that, where even in windy Chicago, they were doing it. Against the Saints with a backup quarterback and Gardner Minshew, they were doing it. And now this week with Jalen Hurts, pass to start. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. One short one before we get into the final one, the illegal man downfield penalties. This isn't just an Eagles thing, but it happened in the Eagles game. And I just think it's kind of just like putting, like, I guess a stain is too tough of a word, but aren't we tired of this? It's like the clear path foul in the NBA where it's such a common sense thing to clean up. So the one that I'm referencing, they took a touchdown off the board for the Eagles and what would have been a Devontae Smith touchdown. And it was an illegal man downfield penalty against Landon Dickerson, where by the letter of the law, I guess technically it is a legal man downfield, but he knew the rule. He went out, he blocked 1 yard, and then he kind of just pushed his guy back. And then he was just like standing there and took 1 step forward. So he was technically like maybe 2 yards down the field. So they called a legal man downfield. He wasn't blocking anybody. It wasn't like he got out and was screening all the way downfield, which is kind of the emphasis of the rule, is they didn't want wide receiver screens and just all these plays going downfield with offensive linemen charging at you, where you have to stay at that line of scrimmage. Well, he wasn't doing any of those things. He's kind of just standing there and maybe a yard extra. And it's like, yeah, by the letter of the law, that is a penalty. But in reality, like, we don't want to see field goals as fans. We want to see touchdowns. We want to see excitement. And when plays are getting called back like that, instead of a touchdown for Devontae Smith, and instead it's like a 5-yard penalty on Landon Dickerson because he took one extra step, it's just, I feel like this is kind of a common sense thing. And I know the statistics are showing that this penalty is getting called at a very increased rate, not only this year, but last year as well. It has spiked an incredible amount this year alone. And I just feel like as fans, we're probably at the point where we're like, all right, this is getting a little absurd. It's slowing the game down. It's causing less exciting plays. And we don't have a good grasp on what that rule is actually for. It's a player safety rule so that the offensive lineman didn't get a full head of steam. But now we're just calling them ticky-tack stuff, and it's kind of slowing the game down. So I thought that was one that no matter who you root for, you're probably really getting tired of that penalty. And then one more thing, just this wasn't a takeaway that I wrote down, but I just wanted to touch on the coaching staff real quick. So I have faith in this coaching staff because I think they've done a great job, and it's going to lead in my last point that 14-3 is nothing to snuff at. I think this was probably the most incredible Eagle season that I have been a part of. Hats off to the coaching staff for, there's been a lot of times where I've watched teams that have a lot of talent on paper. It doesn't really matter till you play the games. They executed well all year. It seemed like they were focused all year. The only time where they really hit a hiccup is when the MVP of the league and Jalen Hurts went down. I thought they did an incredible job. But if there was like one concern going from Sunday's game against the Giants into the playoffs, it's just like reading the room. So what I mean by that, here's a perfect example that you saw late in the first half. The Giants were calling timeouts because they wanted to get one final possession before the half. So they call a timeout. You know that they're calling timeouts. The previous play was an 11-yard run on first down by Kenny Gainwell. So if you run the ball, it's first and goal. They're forced to call a timeout. You're having success in the run game. Instead, you call a pass play. It doesn't work. Jack Stoll, your backup tight end, is blocking the edge rush. You get your MVP quarterback sacked, who has an AC joint sprain in his shoulder. You lose 10 yards. Now, they did have to call a timeout anyway because of the sack, but if there's an incompletion there, then you stop the clock for them when they're purposely trying to get the ball back. It's just those like small detail reading the rooms there where it's like first and goal from the 10. They have 2 timeouts, minute 46. You run the ball there. Say you get it to the 6. Say you're even at the 7. Say you even get nothing. They have 1 timeout left, and you've got 2 shots at the end zone with 2 incredible wide receivers and a great tight end. It just is one of those just reading the room things where I think the coaching staff has done a great job. Every like statistical category backs it up, and they deserve a lot of praise. But there are still certain moments where you're like, can you guys just read the room a little bit better? But again, they've done a fantastic job this year. This was probably the most fun Eagles season that we have ever watched. I know that they won the Super Bowl. I'm just talking regular season. I'm sure that was way more fun for everybody. But even that year, by the end of the year, you're like, all right, we have a backup quarterback now. It felt like this was a great opportunity. There are too many injuries mounting up. Towards after Carson Wentz got hurt on December 10th, it was like a few games that were really rigid with Nick Foles. And you're like, if you guys remember, they were talking about signing Colin Kaepernick. Even in 2004, so that it was a similar situation where we started hot. We finished 13-3. We were 13-1, and the last 2 weeks didn't matter. And T.O. had gotten hurt, so that kind of took the air out of the sails a little bit. So this season's definitely up there with those 2 seasons as far as the most fun. But to me, I just think it was the most fun we've had watching Eagles football in my lifetime as a 27-year-old, and it was fantastic. 14-3, the 1 seed, franchise record in wins, franchise record for total points scored, franchise record for total sacks. Single season receiving yards record by A.J. Brown, total yards single season record by Jalen Hurts, total receptions by wide receiver and Devontae Smith. They were second fewest yards per game on defense. They led the league in tackles for loss. They were 3 sacks off the NFL record for sacks. So I just can't get over how impressive and how much fun we've had. And I'm just so excited for the playoffs. And albeit like the last few weeks, you didn't get to watch Jalen Hurts, so it's not as exciting. And this week it was more just like, all right, beat the backups and get out. So that's not fun. But I think if you're looking at it, not just yesterday, but from a September to December point of view and into early January, you couldn't have asked for much better. I'm so thrilled with this team. I'm so excited for where we could take it. The talent on this team is through the roof. We have said it on this show many, many times. If they are healthy, they can compete with anybody. It's all about health. Hopefully they're getting healthy. Let's get Lane Johnson back. Let's get Avonte back. Let's get Josh Sweat back. 2 weeks for Jalen Hurts to heal. We'll see who we play in the divisional round, and I cannot wait. What a great Eagles regular season, and let's see where the playoffs take us.